1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 51. Behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. Although this verse corresponds to the other verse talking about the second coming of Christ, our prayer is for us to understand the mystery behind the Holy Convocation and understand also that this particular mystery, once understood, will take us out of our slumber and make a stand for the Lord, though the heaven falls. Exodus chapter 9, verse 23. And Moses stretched forth his rod toward heaven, and the Lord sent thunder and hail, and the fire ran along upon the ground, and the Lord rained hail upon the land of Egypt. And the hail smote throughout all the land of Egypt, all that was in the field, both man and beast. And the hail smote every herb of the field, and brake every tree of the field. And the flax and the barley were smitten, for the barley was in the ear, and the flax was bold. But the wheat and the rye were not smitten, for they were not grown up. Leviticus chapter 23, verse 10. Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, when you be come into the land which I give unto you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, then you shall bring a sheaf of the firstfruits of your harvest unto the priest. And he shall wave the sheaf before the Lord to be accepted for you. On the morrow after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. The sanctuary is the key that opens the mystery of the biblical calendar and the holy convocations. Passover festival, the ceremony of the barley. The Grace Amadon Collection, Crucifixion Date, Part 5, page 8. The ceremony of the barley was the divine rule by which the position of the month Abib was located. If by the 1st of Abib the barley was not sufficiently advanced for the Passover festival, then a leap month was added, and the feast period of the year was delayed until the following month. And this was called an intercalation, an embollismic year. The meaning of Abib, barley is ripe. The first month of the Hebrew year, Abib, meaning barley is ripe, pointed to the season of barley. As we read in Exodus chapter 9, verses 31 and 32, Moses gives a very important detail under the seventh plague. And the flax and the barley were smitten, for the barley was in the ear, and the flax was bold, which corresponds to the beginning of April, when it is a common year. But the wheat and the rye were not smitten, for they were not grown up, corresponding to June. And when we study into the Bible, it corresponds usually to the Julian Gregorian reckoning, as the Gregorian only appears in history around 1500 of our era. The Hebrew calendar regulation. The month was determined by the moon, and the year was by the sun and the solar season. Sidusky, Chronology of the Jews, page 615. The aim of the Mosaic command was to regulate the months according to the course of the moon and the whole year in accordance with the course of the sun by assigning as a starting point the lunar month coinciding with the beginning of a determined solar season. Continuing with Sidusky, and as found in Grace Amadon Collection, that determined solar season was still the barley harvest in the time of Christ. The Feast of the Sanctuary, the luni-solar barley harvest Mosaic law calendation. It had to meet three conditions. Number one, the ending of the latter rain. Number two, the regular period of the ripened barley, and number 3, the filling of the one moon possible in that limited time after the first week in April, exactly determine the Paschal feast and all the other festivals of the Hebrew year. The results were dependable and specific, especially when we are dealing with a common year, taken from the Grace Hamadan collection. The change of the Hebrew calendation came after the destruction of Jerusalem. After the dispersion of the Jews, the Sanhedrin did not content itself to observe the maturity of the barley, but added to it the observation and calculation of the equinox. Taken from the book Patriarch and Prophet, page 540, corresponding to chapter 52, the annual feast. The Passover was followed by the 7 days feast of unleavened bread. The first and the seventh day were days of holy convocation, when no servile work was to be performed. On the second day of the feast, the first fruits of the year's harvest were presented before God. Barley was the earliest grain in Palestine, and at the opening of the feast, it was beginning to ripen. A sheaf of this grain was waved by the priest before the altar of God as an acknowledgement that all was his. Not until this ceremony had been performed was the harvest to be gathered. Looking now in the library of 144,000 teachers, the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb, we want to attract your attention to the biblical calendar from 2020 to 2030, as something very important is showing up this year for 2023. And the same also is happening in 2030. And this is corresponding to the feast this year. The new moon for this year, 2023, Gregorian reckoning, corresponded to the month of March. On the 25th of March was the new moon, the new month, and what we call also the new year. Being that the new moon was on a Saturday Gregorian reckoning, then the following Sabbaths and Holy Convocation will be celebrated on a Saturday Gregorian reckoning. The 8th, the 15th, 22nd, and 29th biblical Sabbath for the first month of the year. In this month as well, we have the Feast of Passover, celebrated on the 14th of the first month, corresponding to the 7th of April Gregorian reckoning. The Feast of Unleavened Bread, always coming on a 7-day Sabbath, the 15th of the month, and also a Holy Convocation kept as a Sabbath. Then we have the Feast of First Fruit on the 16th of the first month, corresponding to the 9th of April Gregorian reckoning, and also the Feast of Unleavened Bread on the 21st of the first biblical month, corresponding to the 14th of April Gregorian reckoning. We would like to attract your attention specifically to the Feast of Passover, Unleavened Bread, and First Fruits. The Feast of Unleavened Bread, first and last day of Unleavened Bread, were always observed as a holy convocation, as a Sabbath, although the last day of Unleavened Bread does not fall on the 7-day Sabbath, but they are observed as Sabbath. However, the Feast of Passover and First Fruits, we can do secular work on those 2 days. And this is found in the book of Leviticus, chapter 23. This year, the Feast of First Fruit also corresponds to Easter for the Roman Catholic Church and for most Protestant. Easter always falls on a Sunday, as it was established by the Roman Emperor Constantine in the year 321 AD and enforced in the year 325 AD. However, it is important to note that First Fruits was not kept as a Sabbath, like the Feast of Unleavened Bread in the spring. It was kept and observed as a day, as a feast. However, we can do secular work on that day. And first fruit corresponds to the day following the Sabbath, where Christ rested in the tomb after he died at the feast of Passover. So therefore, first fruit has a value in the history of redemption, but we can do secular work on that day. And it's interesting because when it falls at Easter, the Sunday being a holy day, according to the Roman Catholic Church, then if we think about the circumstances of a Sunday law, where Sunday would become the day that we have to worship, and it will be enforced as history has foretold, we know here that first fruits, then, if it ever occurs on the day, the same day as Easter, it will be enforced on us as well. We need to use wisdom and not bring trouble before the time of trouble. Remember, we can do secular work, but we should choose to make this day a day for gospel medical missionary, visiting the sick, taking care of the poor and the needy. And then we can remember that this way it is still not bringing trouble upon us. However, it is not compromising because we know that the feast of the Lord are Passover, unleavened bread, and first fruit for the spring feast. This is a very important time this month, especially for this year, because according to the calendar, as we have seen, there is only one other month where this occurs, although we have not verified if the first fruit in 2030 in April Gregorian reckoning will be also corresponding to Easter for that year. But it's the same pattern of a Friday Gregorian reckoning for Passover, Saturday for unleavened bread, and Sunday for first fruits. But if you stand by the word of the Lord, you cannot make a mistake, and you pray and ask wisdom what to do in times like these. 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 20 brings now not necessarily the types and the antitypes of the Feast of First Fruits, but another application. The first application, as we saw, had to do with the biblical calendar, when to celebrate the feast. This application here has to do with the first fruits unto the Lord. But now is Christ risen from the dead and become the first fruit of them that slept. So Christ here is called the first fruits of them that slept. Revelation chapter 7, verse 4, and I heard the number of them which were sealed, and they were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. Revelation chapter 7, verse 9, and this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude which no man could number, of all nations and kindreds and people and tongues, stood before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed with white robes and palms in their hands. We saw, as John saw himself, that he heard that the number of those who were sealed was 144,000. However, the great multitude he could not number. There was no number given for the great multitude, representing those who were righteous from the time of Adam to the time that Christ is coming. Revelation chapter 14, verse 3, and they sung as it were a new song before the throne and before the four beasts and the elders, and no man could learn that song but the 144,000 which were redeemed from the earth. Here again, we have the 144,000. The Bible calls them the 144,000. It's the same as 144,000. And these are the redeemed from the earth. When we look at Revelation chapter 14, verse 4, they are they which were not defiled with woman, for they are virgins. These are they which follow the Lamb, whithersoever he goeth. These were redeemed from among men, being the firstfruits unto God and to the Lamb. This is beautiful to ponder upon and analyze these wonderful truths as Christ became the first fruit of them that slept. And now we are finding that the 144,000 are also called first fruits in the Bible. And to know more about what it means to be redeemed, to be an overcomer, we recommend greatly that you find the 7 blessings that are promised to the overcomers, reading chapter 2 and 3 of the book of Revelation. These promises of blessings are addressed to the 7 churches, and yet they are applicable through time and they are universal to those who are to live in the last days. We encourage you to study these very carefully. Revelation chapter 14, verse 14, and I looked, and behold, a white cloud, and upon the cloud one sat like unto the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. Another mystery to be revealed. If you study carefully, you can relate what you will read in Revelation 14 and on about the sickle and the harvest that is being ready to be taken over by the angels. And these harvests are 3, the last one being the grapes, representing the wicked, according to the book of Matthew. The 2 others that precede the grapes are, we believe, the barley and the wheat, according to what we just found in the book of Exodus. All of these wonderful truths are revealed to us at this time in order to understand the significance and the deep meaning of the feast of the Lord, the Holy Convocation, which we are celebrating at this time. And we read in the book, The Great Controversy, page 652, chapter 40, who are the 144,000? Upon the crystal sea before the throne, that sea of glass as it were mingled with fire, so resplendent is it with the glory of God, are gathered the company that have gotten the victory over the beast, and over his image, and over his mark, and over the number of his name. With the Lamb upon Mount Zion, having the harps of God, they stand, the 144,000 that were redeemed from among men. And there is heard, as the sound of many waters, and as the sound of a great thunder, the voice of harpers harping with their harps. And they sing a new song before the throne, a song which no man can learn save the 144,000. It is the song of Moses and the Lamb, a song of deliverance. None but the 144,000 can learn that song, for it is the song of their experience, an experience such as no other company have ever had. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. These have been translated from the earth, from among the living, are counted as the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb. So these, they have been translated from the earth. They have not known death. These are they which came out of great tribulation. They have passed through the time of trouble such as never was since there was a nation. They have endured the anguish of the time of Jacob's trouble. They have stood without an intercessor through the final outpouring of God's judgment. But they have been delivered, for they have washed their robe and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. In their mouth was found no guile, for they are without fault before God. Therefore are they before the throne of God, and serve him day and night in his temple. And he that sitteth on the throne shall dwell among them. They have seen the earth wasted with famine and pestilence, the sun having power to scorch men with great heat, and they themselves have endured suffering, hunger, and thirst. But they shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more, neither shall the sun light on them, nor any heat. For the Lamb which is in the midst of the throne shall feed them, and shall lead them unto living fountains of waters, and God shall wipe away all tears from their eyes. And these they have gone through the 7 plagues of the book of Revelation, again bringing them as first fruits unto the Lord, just like the first fruits and the feast of Passover and unleavened bread under the 10 plagues in Exodus. May the Lord bless you as you continue to contemplate these truths, because the time is at hand.